Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology turned podcasts. And everyone, welcome into the program. I hope that you're doing well and you're ready for today's show because you may have guessed it. It's Friday. You know what that means? Yes, it's the National State Fair on the lawn. It's ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, let's see. I believe by the time that you hear this, we're gonna have one more show right before the 4th of July. So big 250 coming up. But everyone, I hope that you have had a wonderful week, a nice, productive, busy week, and you are ready to head out into the weekend. But before you do, have some Computer America. And today on the program, we have Ralph Bond. He is our science and tech trends correspondent, and it's going to be pretty heavy on the science today, but we're going to be talking about renewables, energy. We're going to be talking about some really exciting stuff that, we've been getting little updates here and there. And ladies and gentlemen, even when the whole world seems to be falling apart, it's okay. There's other good stories that really show we're heading in a good direction. We just have to get there. So, ladies and gentlemen, Ralph brings us that every single week, every Friday. And before we get started, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future show notes, articles, videos, all that and more. Computeramerica.com. We even have a section for Ralph. And of course, you can always go to the show notes and just find all the links, all of the topics of conversation, anything that we talk about on the program today, you can find at our website. So go ahead and check that out. So if you're listening, if you're watching, we appreciate both. And yeah, let's just go ahead and bring Ralph on and get today started. So once again, science and tech trends correspondent talks about all kinds of things. We'll get into that in just a moment. But Ralph, welcome back onto the program. How have you been?
It's great to be back as always on another insane week of very depressing, dark, horrible news around the world. Heat waves, wars, everything. No, if you're looking for that, folks, you're come to the wrong place, because what Ben and I do is give you hope for the future. And let me explain, especially if you're brand new to the show. What Ben and I do every Friday is highlight 4 articles that show us key trends and developments in all things science and tech, including, of course, almost every story has artificial intelligence. But we look at robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, agricultural tech, construction tech, space research, physics, you name it. But most important of all, as I alluded at the beginning here, we're going to give you hope for a better future thanks to amazing breakthroughs happening every single day in the world of science and technology.
Absolutely. And I think you really start off with, with a really good one here, because again, you can follow along in the show notes by going out to the website, and you can, see all the links if you want to check out more after the fact. But you can also watch along as we go. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to head to a place that I think everyone knows everything about, the Orkney Islands. Yes, everyone knows about these things. But yeah, this is really exciting. In a time when renewable energy, Ralph, I've been hearing a lot about that. Not so much here in the United States, but in a lot of other places, it just makes sense to get these renewables off the ground. And Ralph, it's one thing to be like, okay, new wind farm here, new wind farm there, yeah, great. You never really hear about the most powerful, and by the way, I said wind farm. This is Tidal, I should say. But yeah, you never really hear about, new kind of big projects like this. They're always just kind of incremental ones. So sometimes it's cool to see what is possible and what is coming online. So story number 1.
Absolutely. And before we jump into story number 1, I want to encourage everybody, please come out to computeramerica.com, get what we call the show notes for today's show, because we have the text notes, we have links, we have pictures, all this kind of good stuff. And if you're listening to us as a podcast, that's great, but come back out to computeramerica.com so you can see what we're talking about. Sometimes we have videos embedded in the stories as well. But with that said, let's jump into this. The first story comes from an outfit called Marine insight.com. Really cool outlet, by the way. Here's the headline: World's most powerful tidal turbine, Orbital 2, begins operations off Scotland's Orkney Islands. Good old Scotland. So here we go. We've got a link. We've got additional information. I went out and looked at their company website. It's very, very interesting, and a great video, by the way. But first, I think before we jump into this, Ben, for our listeners, we need to give a visual description of what this thing looks like. Well, this thing is a very long, kind of think of it like a skinny submarine. It kind of looks like that, sort of a tubular type structure. And then
Ralph,
about
my immediate thought was, who put a deconstructed plane on this thing? It looks like a plane with two wings, two propellers on either side, and then the fuselage in the middle.
Yeah, a very good description, because again, it does look like a fuselage of a plane. That's a better description than a submarine. And in the middle of it are two wings with giant blades what you're going to find out, though, is those blades can move up and down. So we'll get into that and explain what that's all about. But I wanted to give a visual or a verbal visual explanation of what this thing looks like. So the article describes the start of operations of the Orbital 2, the world's most powerful working tidal turbine, located off the coast of Scotland's Orkney Islands. And it's developed by an outfit called Orbital Marine Power. Wonderful website, by the way. The floating turbine has the capacity of 2 megawatts and uses the movement of ocean tides to generate clean electricity. Now, the Orbital 2 is installed at the European Marine Energy Centre, which is located also in Scotland. And that's a leading testing site for marine renewable energy where tidal currents are especially strong. That's why they picked this location. Now, the turbine consists of a 74-meter long floating platform anchored to the seabed. Now, that would be 242 feet approximately. So this thing's big. This allows and by the way, in the show notes, when you see blue text, that's stuff I've added, because a lot of times these magazines, these articles are aimed at people who are in the industry and just kind of know what you're talking about or expect you to know about these things. I sometimes go out and add additional information to help explain things to me, because I do not know everything, unlike my wife's accusation that I think I do. Anyway, so this long hull allows the system to ride out massive storm waves rather than absorbing the shear force structurally, drastically reducing mechanical fatigue. Another key advantage over traditional ocean tidal generators, the Orbital O2 uses an advanced 360-degree blade pitching system. This is really interesting. When the tide reverses direction, you'll love this, the turbine blades simply twist their pitch completely around. This allows the O2 to seamlessly generate electricity from both bidirectional tidal flows. Pretty clever.
It's so kind of clever, because when I think of tidal turbines, especially, it's kind of these kind of floating, kind of ball-looking things that just kind of spin, that are totally encapsulated. This is taking it to a whole nother level of engineering. Like, just from an engineering standpoint, this just looks amazing and is very different than other, applications that I've seen.
Yeah, it's very, very clever. And going on here now, 2 underwater turbine units, each containing a 1 megawatt generator, are mounted on retractable legs. So we talked about it looks like an airplane fuselage with wings with big gigantic propellers. But picture in your mind that this can go up and down, and you'll see why that's important here for maintenance and other issues. So it's retractable legs. And here's the deal. As tidal currents flow through the area, the rotors spin and produce electricity. The Orbital O2 can generate enough electricity to supply approximately 2,000 homes and is expected to prevent around 2,200 tons of carbon dioxide emissions each year, because, of course, it's clean energy. And to wrap it up, its floating design also makes maintenance easier, because the turbines can be raised above the water surface for servicing, reducing operational costs. That's why these wings are flexible. It's so you can bring them up out of the water, clean, and do whatever you need to do, and then drop them back in.
All around, it seems very innovative. And Ralph, I think at this point, I'm sure that, engineers are engineers. I'm sure they've done plenty of checks and some real world demonstrations. But Ralph, you see one and supplying 2,000 homes with electricity. It doesn't sound like the largest thing in the world, but if this one proves effective and cost worthy and, a good investment, right. Hey, there's really no reason not to have multiple and a lot of these things. It's just adding to the resiliency of, and Ralph, I know we don't bring modern news into, or, other non-tech news into this a lot, but I think the last couple of months have really shown us just how a spike in oil prices, a spike in gas prices. Yep. Ralph, the countries that have been doing the best are the ones with solar, wind, tidal, other sources of electricity. So even for Ralph, there's just so many positives to really diversifying your electricity, and this seems like a real good candidate.
No, that's an excellent point you raised. This horrible mess in Iran and the impact it's had on global oil prices shows us we just cannot, in my opinion, we simply as human beings cannot go on relying on fossil fuels. It's just a losing proposition. But I'll get off my soapbox and move on.
It's really one of the key things of green electricity. It's not just about saving the planet, which should be enough. It's not just about making cheaper electricity, which should be enough. It's not just about just all these different things. It's about we're going to need it. We're going to need all the electricity. And Ralph, hey, who knows? Maybe we'll put a data center on it or something. It'll be great. It'll be grand. Yeah. All that water and all that electricity is just begging for data centers. So there you go. Story number one. Story number two, we're going to go from electricity to electricity. And this one, though, what about a sun, the big hot thing in the sky? What about a sun right in your backyard? And that's something maybe the nice folks over in Washington and Oregon can brag soon. So, Ralph, story number two.
Yes, story number two is something that should have been headline news, in my opinion, even in the mainstream media. It shocks me that it was not, but let's explain. This comes from Geekwire. It's also been covered extensively through other news outlets. The headline here is Helion, that's an outfit, a company, secures world's first regulatory licenses for fusion power plant being built in Washington, meaning Washington State. And again, this comes from Geekwire. This is really pretty significant news. So Helion Energy has become the first company in the world to receive regulatory licenses for a commercial fusion power plant. The licenses were granted by the Washington State Department of Health and allow Helion to move forward with construction and operation of its fusion facility called Orion near Malaga, Washington. And if you're looking at the show notes or watching us online, come back out to the show notes, you'll see a picture of the site where they're building this. And when you think of Oregon and Washington, you think of waterfalls and forests and trees, and that's west of the Cascades, folks. When you go east of the Cascade mountain ranges, you get a mix of high deserts, they call it, and so forth. And you can see from the picture, this is out in the boonies where they're building this. It's just flat pancake land, and it's very deserty. But going on from that, now I inserted in the blue text in the show notes, I wanted to know more or remind everybody about fusion versus fission. Okay, so nuclear fission is where a heavy atom splits apart into smaller ones. This is the process used in current nuclear power plants. So that's the typical thing you expect when you talk about a nuclear power plant, right, Ben?
That wouldn't make a lot of headlines because that's 3 Mile Island and all the other happy fun ones that we're all very familiar with. So yeah, makes
exactly
sense.
Right. And then, but nuclear fusion, this is where light atoms smash together to form a heavier one. This is the process that powers stars like our sun, okay? And of course, as you know, Ben, and our audience, I'm sure, is very well, for decades, people have been trying to figure out how can we make this happen on Earth in a positive, productive way so that we could have virtually endless energy. right? So that's been the big goal.
Yeah, it's, and I do not know the exact physics behind it all, but I do know that you're taking something that is extremely abundant, be it helium, be it, one of these other lighter atoms, and you're smashing them together, and then the amount of energy that is released from making that new element is what you would try to harness. And
exactly.
Yeah, Ralph, it's kind of like the fun part of the opposite of nuclear, like we do, is that you're taking something that is very abundant, which is, helium, the most abundant, molecule in the universe, and you're turning it into something, something else that, I don't know, whatever helium and helium makes. If I knew chemistry, I'd be better at that. But Ralph, my point is, you're not taking something that is kind of rare and scarce. You're taking something that is totally abundant and turning it into a lot of electricity. So yeah, it's awesome.
Pretty cool. And so again, to recap here, unlike traditional nuclear fission plants, fusion has the potential to provide large amounts of carbon-free energy with less long-lived radioactive waste. So the benefits of fusion are huge if, and my show notes insert a little reality check time. As the article points out, however, no company has yet demonstrated a fusion power system that consistently produces more energy than it consumes. So, a little reality check. But what I find fascinating, Ben, is the fact that this company has gone as far as it has gone and has gotten the approvals to go forward. Because here's the deal. Helion, the company in question, is one of more than 40 companies worldwide trying to commercialize fusion power. Think about that. This is kind of like a great race. In 2023, the company signed an agreement with Microsoft to begin supplying electricity to a data center by 2028 if its technology succeeds. So we're giving you, again, real bleeding edge, early kind of stuff here. The Orion plant is expected to generate 50 megawatts of electricity. Helion has also raised about $1.5 billion in total funding, pretty significant, including a recent $463 million investment round. So the article notes that experts remain divided on how quickly fusion can become practical and affordable. That's the issue. But to wrap it up here, still, even with that in mind, regulators and lawmakers have been adapting rules to support the emerging industry, and Helion's licensing milestone is viewed as a significant step toward making fusion energy a commercial reality. Now, you and I are dyed-in-the-wool geeks, and in my mind, I'm sorry, this is so significant. Just the symbolic significance of getting this first license, first go-ahead is, I think, in the world is so important. It just blows me away it wasn't covered. And yet we're spending time dealing with people peeling up the covering of the reflection pool in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
That gets big news, and this is lost. I give up.
It really is a matter of interest, and it's cool to kind of see the beginnings of the building, and their website has even more pictures if you want to go check that out. There's a link in that first artitle.
There you go.
But yeah, Ralph, I think we'll hear more about this. Getting a permit to build is one thing. Firing up the machine, I think, for the first time will be another huge one. And Ralph, as you pointed out rightly, there's a lot of ifs and whens. If this technology succeeds, when it starts to generate electricity. But Ralph, we're going to hear a lot more about this because, again, the benefit of this is that if it can start to produce energy, which you said no one has been able to do that yet, if it can produce more energy than it takes to start up the reaction, I mean, Ralph, that starts just this mad dash of trying to build as many and as large of this exact same facility all over the world, really, because at that point, you are just, I don't want to say printing free electricity because that makes no sense, but it is the most efficient electricity generation you can get. So, getting the permit, I understand why people kind of gloss over it, but hopefully it is the first step to something really transformative to electricity. So,
well, yeah. And to your point, kind of amplifying it and sort of making a little poetic statement, in the world of green energy, fusion is the holy grail. If you can get there it's a whole new world.
You don't even need, and not that saying you should just scrap your solar now, but you don't even need solar or wind or anything like that. You could just stop messing with the ecosystems, and you can just focus on this one singular thing. So
again, as you and I've said so many times over the past number of years, it would be a part of the wheel. It is a spoke in the wheel of green energy. I don't think these other things are going to go away, and I'm not saying you are saying that, but it'll be this amazing augmentation. How wonderful. If we get there.
Yeah, if we get there, there you go. But and for everyone out there, it's Ralph. It wasn't too many years ago when the Large Hadron Collider, which was a science experiment to kind of find slamming particles together, mapping it out, all that kind of thing. And people were like, "Oh, is that going to start a black hole in our backyard and and destroy the entire Earth?" It wasn't that many years ago from that to now we're like, hey, we can start to make our own stars essentially. In these things. And by the way, just one more record, just to throw it out there. Ralph said no system has produced more electricity than it has taken to start it up. The record, for those who don't know, was set by China back in 2024, I want to say, maybe 2025. They were able to get this reaction, Ralph, up and running for 1,066 seconds. So that's about 18 minutes. They were able to keep the temperature above 100 million degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
That is hot. That is as hot as the surface of the sun. So
it's amazing. Yep. Just amazing.
There's a lot of science going on here. A lot that we don't know. But if you want to find out more, check out the show notes. Story number 2. Story number 3, Ralph. Let's go ahead, jump on down, and get back to basics. And by basics, I mean, milk, butter, eggs, that kind of thing. No, story number 3 is going to be all about green energy as well. I'm seeing a pattern here. And,
yes, that's true.
Yeah, Ralph, let's talk about milk.
Yeah, so today's show, the first 3 stories are going to be very much in keeping with each other in terms of renewable energy. And our last story, by the way, will be medical technology. We'll get into that in a moment here. But this comes from Renewable Energy News, another wonderful outlet. Headline, Circularity Fuels, that's the name of a company, converts raw dairy biogas, cow poop, to jet fuel in world's first end-to-end pilot. And a trend that Ben and I have been seeing now for, the last several years is this mad dash to get synthetic or bio-derived jet fuels, to get away from fossil fuels to be able to power our world's jet airlines. So that's a big trend, and this fits nicely into that category. So let's get into this. A company called Circularity Fuels has successfully demonstrated a new way to make sustainable aviation fuel from dairy farm waste, aka cow poop. Now, in what it describes as the world's first complete end-to-end pilot test, the company converted raw biogas from cow manure directly into jet fuel. And in a moment, we're going to understand why this directly bit is so important.
The way that you phrase that, or I should say the way that the article phrased that, the end-to-end jet fuel, I'm just imagining, a jet pulling into the airport and they just plug the big tube into like the end of a cow and they're like, all right, here we go. And they just, kind of fuel the, no, but that's silly, but yeah.
That would make it funny. You could ask Gemini to create that image as an illustration. That'd be funny. So the 6-month pilot took place at a large dairy farm near Madera, California, where methane-rich biogas from manure is normally just vented into the atmosphere. See you later. Instead of treating the gas extensively before use, and this is a key part of why this innovation from this company is so important. We're going to learn about what normally has to happen if you're going to try to take the methane gas from cow poop and turn it into some kind of useful product or fuel. You're going to find out in just a moment is a very complicated process, but these folks have figured out how to make it really direct. So instead of treating the gas extensively before use, Circularity Fuels processed it directly, producing jet fuel that meets industry standards and can be blended with conventional aviation fuel. Now, in the show notes, blue text, I said, I've got to learn more. When the article says, instead of treating the gas extensively before use, this publication is aimed at experts in the field. So people would go, sure, I know what they mean. Well, Ralph doesn't know what they mean, so I go out and learn more. And in the show notes, let's talk about this. So when they say processed it directly means that Circularity Fuels skipped a bunch of the usual complex cleanup steps and turned the raw gas straight into jet fuel. So normally, when you capture or produce raw gas like biogas or industrial syngas to make fuel, it contains a lot of impurities. Gee, no surprise. Impurities, moisture, or unwanted compounds. Now, the standard practice requires treating the gas extensively, meaning it goes through multiple separate stages of filtering, scrubbing, and chemical refining just to get it clean enough to use it as a starting material. So with that in mind now, friends, now all of us understand what they're talking about. In contrast, and in simple terms, the Circularity Fuels process has only 2 main steps. So step 1, convert raw biogas into syngas, synthetic gas. Dairy manure produces biogas that is roughly 65% methane, or methane, as my British cousins would say, and 35% carbon dioxide. So instead of removing the CO2 first, which is an expensive process, Circularity feeds the raw biogas directly into its URO, I hope I'm saying this right, O-U-R-O, URO reactor. Using electricity, the reactor converts both the methane and much of the CO2 into syngas, a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. And then here you go, step 2, convert the syngas into jet fuel. The syngas then goes into the AION, A-I-O-N reactor, which they've created, which uses a version of the well-known Fischer-Tropsch process. And again, this magazine thinks, oh, you know what that is. Of course you know what the well-known Fischer-Tropsch process is. I go, what's that? So in the side notes, I'm not going to read this. You can learn about what this process is. It's pretty darned interesting. But this process, by the way, chemically assembles the CO, carbon dioxide, and H2 molecules into liquid hydrocarbons that are refined into sustainable aviation fuel. The company says its technology is much cheaper than many other sustainable aviation fuel production methods because it uses low-cost waste biogas, cow poop, and avoids expensive gas cleaning steps. This is a marvel of engineering how they pulled this off.
Yeah, just seeing, and for those who've been watching the video, I've been kind of poking around the website and showing off some of the technology, Ralph. Sometimes you see scientists in their lab coats and beakers and laboratories. Pretty much everything that we've seen from the website here has been stuff deployed in the field showing that it's working, and they're like, hey, we can ship this, we can make this, it's going out right now. Like that, this is the fun part of this, is that we're not talking about, maybe they'll be able to scale this up, we'll see what we can do. It's like, no, they're shipping, they're ready to go.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It truly is very exciting. So its modular reactor system is designed to work at individual farms, so scales to something that simple, and other small biogas sites, making production more decentralized and scalable. So again, to your point, Ben, that the website is wonderful because it shows you that they're not talking about you need to build a massive plant to do that. No, they've got these modular systems that can be put into even small farms. I love this. And with the pilot now complete, the pilot testing, Circularity Fuels plans to build its first commercial scale facility in 2027 and expand the technology to agricultural regions across the United States, Latin America, and Europe, and I'm sure eventually the rest of the world as well.
You could imagine that anywhere with a sizable cow population would be very interested in turning what would be other, and waste. And I know manure has its uses, in a lot of other industries, but to turn waste right there on site into a much more profitable jet fuel, that has so much appeal. So. Really amazing story. And again, they're not just thinking and hoping, they are doing.
Right.
And just looking at the website real quick, they're also working on whatever renewable naphtha is, do not know, and renewable diesel. So this is also a technology coming to trucks as well. So really cool stuff.
Fascinating company. Yep.
Yep. And by the way, if you heard that sucking sound, that was me generating an image with AI so that, I'm sure another river just went dry. But check it out.
Yes, I love it.
Who knows? Maybe it's a thumbnail for the YouTube. You never know.
I love it. That's hilarious.
There you go. For those who can't see, it is simply a plane being fueled by a cow. Although it looks like it's squirting milk out. So, yeah, it is what it is. So there you go. Okay, so story number 3. Silly stuff. Story number 3. Story number 4, Ralph. Let's go ahead and jump down and talk a little bit about pacemakers. A pretty well-known technology. But yeah, this one might be a little bit more advanced than you're used to.
Right. And friends, if you're new to the show, typically the 4th of the 4 stories we highlight each week is medical technology related, because that's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, literally. And this comes from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, their news website, which of course is just a treasure chest of fabulous information. And the headline here is ultrasound-based pacemaker non-invasively steadies the heart. Subtitle: the new design could offer a surgery-free alternative to traditional cardiac implants. This is such great news. I just love it.
Why would they do that? Everyone loves open heart surgery. It is their favorite part.
Yeah, you bet. So researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology have developed a new type of pacemaker that could one day, so it's early research here, one day regulate heartbeats without surgery. Anybody who's familiar with pacemakers understands the significance of just that one statement alone. So instead of being implanted inside the body like traditional pacemakers, the new device is a small sticker placed on the chest that uses ultrasound waves to stimulate the heart. Let that sink in. Wow.
Really impressive.
It is. So traditional pacemakers, if you're not familiar, use wires and electrical signals to control heart rhythm. While they have saved millions of lives, and they certainly have, they require surgery, and the device must remain inside the body. Now, MIT's new approach uses ultrasound, which can safely pass through body tissue to activate heart cells from outside the body. And at this point, you might be, as I was, saying, well, how in the heck do you do that? Well, the technology combines ultrasound with a technique called sonogenetics. That's a cool sounding term. Scientists modified heart cells so they become more sensitive to ultrasound. Modified heart cells to become more sensitive to ultrasound. Wow. When the ultrasound waves reach these cells, they open special channels that allow calcium to enter. This calcium signal causes the heart cells to contract and beat. Now, in the show notes, blue text, I inserted a whole bunch of information that I went out and found, because I said sonogenetics. Don't assume Ralph knows this. I need to learn more. So you can come out to the show notes, look at the information. I'm not going to spend time on it right now. More details about what is sonogenetics. It's abso-frickin-lutely. Oh, okay, I've got to read one sentence. Sonogenetics is an emerging scientific field that uses focused ultrasound waves to non-invasively control the activity of specific cells inside the body, most notably neurons in the brain. So what the MIT folks did was said, well, that works there. Maybe it could help us with the heart. Bing, it did.
Yeah, it's that is definitely a term and a field that I was not even aware of. But yeah, it makes sense that, Ralph, if ultrasound could have done this from the beginning, it kind of makes sense that, they would have probably figured this out by now. But making these kinds of changes to the heart and the heart tissue, that part seems even more impressive. Is really the main thrust of the technology.
Yeah, it's great all the way around and fascinating accordingly. So in laboratory tests, the technology helped engineered human heart cells maintain regular contractions. Again, engineered human heart cells. So they do have to modify the heart cells. The researchers also tested a smaller version of the device on rats, thank you, rats and mice, and found that it could correct irregular heart rhythms and restore normal heartbeats without invasive surgery. And get this, the prototype that they've come up with is about the size of a postage stamp and connects to a small external device containing electronics and batteries. The researchers hope future versions could combine heart monitoring and stimulation in one wearable patch. The technology is still experimental and would need further testing before being used in people. However, it represents a possible future where some patients could control heart rhythm with a wearable device instead of instead of an implanted pacemaker. Drum roll, please. If we haven't ended your week with a happy, upbeat, promising note, I rest my case. Yay!
Round of applause. No, really, that is an amazing story, and of course, MIT never disappoints. It's Ralph, and like, I guess to me, it seems almost like how do you even kind of alter those cells? How do you even kind of get that started? But if they can figure that out, that is going to improve so many lives. And Ralph, you could imagine that, hey, if people can be treated for these irregular heartbeats and stuff like that, you could just imagine how many people don't need heart surgery, don't need heart transplants, don't need heart, what have yous. It's going to have a real knock-on effect on, just a much larger ecosystem than just that. So very cool stuff and love to see it. So then there's story number 4. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have been following along in the show notes, you know what's happening next. If you've just been watching, well, you may see here, we're only about halfway done with the show notes. Ralph really overachieves. We tell him only 4 every week, but he's like, no, I got 4 more on top of that usually. Usually 4 more. Sometimes he sneaks another one in there. But ladies and gentlemen, if you go down to the bottom, you may notice there are the honorable mentions. These are stories that we would totally do if we did not feel like we wanted to keep the show about half an hour, which we're doing pretty good. But ladies and gentlemen, if you want to have more stories, more uplifting news, if you want to hear about all these stories, come on out to the show notes, check it out. Links, key points, everything, just like the other stories, is already included. And just have fun with it. So, Ralph, we can at least tease them with what they would find with the headlines. So let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah, so the last section of the show notes we call honorable mentions, as Ben was outlining. And the first one comes from one of my regular go-to websites, interestingengineering.com. I just love it. Headline, waste oils. Oh, you're going to see a pattern here relative to the story we did before about cow poop turning into jet fuel. So waste oils and fats to be turned into low-emission jet fuel with new modular technology. Subhead, Brazil's Bahia project will use Honeywell's eco-fining process to convert waste oils and fats into lower-emission aviation fuel and renewable diesel. Wow. This is pretty cool. You should check this one out. Our next honorable mention comes from techexplore.com. This is very interesting. Transformers, picture in your mind, transformers, if you have above ground utilities, the transformers, those are kind of like the cylindrical things that you see, and it's all part of the electric system, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the problems, Ben, is those things can catch on fire. In fact, I think a transformer fire caused a terrible, terrible fire in Oregon here some number of years ago. But here's the headline. Nanoengineered wood sets new record for transformer insulation. This is really, I often think to myself, they must be using AI to say, we've got a problem. We need better insulation for transformers to reduce the possibility of them catching on fire or causing terrible fires. And what can we do? And maybe the large language model went out and said, well, hey, you could take oil impregnated densified wood. It's so out there. You got to check it out.
and since you're our science and tech trends guy, a trend that I think we should really highlight is, as things get more high tech, I think some people think, more sterile, more clean, more chrome, more, metal. But man, wood has just been making a real comeback in as a engineered, developed, and worked with, kind of material in all these projects, or I should say in a lot of projects.
So true. That's a very good observation. You're right. We've seen so many fascinating stories about wood cells and wood this and wood that, and can we create new product? It's just amazing. It's good old wood. Mm-hmm. Thank you, trees. Okay, so the next one here from newatlas.com. World first hydrogen-powered gas station for ships passes key trials. This one's really interesting. Check it out. It's very interesting for the ocean industry. Mm-hmm. And our last honorable mention comes from The Guardian. Headline, a solar-powered, oh, I love this story, a solar-powered rubbish-eating boat, the vessel chomping plastic waste out of the sea, guided, and the subhead here is guided by floating barriers. The interceptor has already stopped more than 143,000 pounds of rubbish from entering the Pacific Ocean from one LA river, Los Angeles River. So you have to come out to the show notes. You have to see the picture for this to immediately get it. And check this out. This thing runs autonomously. You can fire this baby up. It's got all the solar panels to keep going. Turn it loose, and you can see in the picture a dramatic example of it scooping up all kinds of horrible plastic bottles and junk from the LA River before it gets to the Pacific. What a genius idea.
Yep, just human trash. And, much in the same vein of that last story, for anyone out there who is also interested, I also recommend you check out Mr. Trash Wheel.
There you go.
Very similar.
Yes.
Not an autonomous boat. That's more of a kind of a waterway kind of cleaning kind of thing. But still very similar. God. And Ralph, like we were saying at the beginning, if you were really bummed out about the news this week, well, there's good stuff happening, and you can go ahead and check that out at our website. Ralph every Friday brings us these amazing stories. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Ralph. I want to thank you out there for listening, and I want to thank everyone out there for tuning in however you do. And hey, have a great weekend. This has been really great. Again, Computer America. If you missed anything or want to double check us, make sure that we're not just making this stuff up. And Ralph, until next week, thank you so much. Everyone else, we'll catch you next time. Have a good weekend. Bye, everyone.